Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today, we're going to be reviewing Chameneon on the Nintendo Switch. Now this game is an original take on the 2D Autorunner design, and it just released today on August 18th of 2022, and sells for only $3.99 on the Nintendo Switch eShop. The game is published by Qbyte Interactive, and it has a download size of only 54 megabytes. Now, does this game inject enough originality into the Autorunner design to be worth your time? Well, that's what we're going to figure out in today's review. Just remember that if you are liking the content, one of the best ways to help support the channel, hit that like button. Now if we begin with the storyline. Now when you start up the game, you do get a text-based introduction to the setup. You've invented the perfect line of communication through cyberspace. Unfortunately, it's been infected by a virus. You therefore have to initiate what's called the Chameneon protocol and surf your way on the neon lines of cyberspace and ultimately defeat the virus. Now, other than this introduction, you won't really get any other storyline elements here till the very ending of the game. However, if you're playing this, it's probably not for the storyline, so let's move on. Now if we jump straight into the gameplay. So now, as I mentioned in the introduction, this game ultimately plays out as an autorunner. However, rather than actually running, you are surfing the neon lines. Now I do want to start out by clarifying one thing. This is an extremely challenging game, and it is so right off of the beginning. If you only have a casual interest in autorunners, I would say this is probably not the ideal entry for you. Because as soon as the first level hits you, although completing the first few levels is simple, if you do want to get that 100% completion for the collection, it is right away extremely challenging. And I would say even halfway through the first world, even just completing the levels does require quite a few attempts. Now the actual basic concepts of the gameplay are very simple. You only have a jump action, followed by the ability to slow down temporarily or accelerate temporarily, and finally, to change which one of the neon lines are currently active. Now that last concept isn't actually introduced till about halfway through the first world, but once it is, it really switches up the gameplay a ton. From there on out, you realize that you can only have one of the two neon colors active, either the blue neon lines or the purple neon lines, and by hitting the X button, you'll be able to flip between the two. And I'll be totally honest, if it wasn't for that original concept, we would have had a pretty bland autorunner here. However, the introduction of that ability to flip between alternating paths really opens up a ton of gameplay options. It does also introduce the fact that not only do you have to memorize the levels, but there is an extreme level of reflex-based action here. Now, as you move your way through the levels, the game will force you to use these basic abilities in a variety of ways. And the game really doesn't help you at all in figuring out those different applications, which is why, as I said earlier, this is really not an autorunner for casual players, but rather players looking for an extreme challenge. There's also a very original gravity concept here, where if you lose contact with a platform for too long, you'll just fly off into space. That is something you'll have to get used to in the beginning, but once you do so, it does become second nature. Now the game does do a very good job as well of adding to the challenge level, adding things like obstacles and eventually even enemies on the different tracks. So overall, gameplay-wise, if you're in the market for an extremely challenging 2D autorunner at a pretty budget price, this one is lining up like a pretty interesting offer. Now if we move on to the controls. Now this will be a pretty short and straightforward section because we pretty much went through the whole control scheme in the description of the gameplay. But the A button here will allow you to jump with your character. The X button is the button used to alternate between the two different neon colors. And finally, the R bumper will give you a temporary boost in speed. The L bumper will temporarily slow you down. The only other thing to mention is that the controls are extremely crisp and responsive. And that's extremely important because a game like this wouldn't be able to function without it. Lastly, if we move on to the graphics and sound. Now they've chosen a very special graphic presentation where your character actually looks very pixelated, however everything else has a very clean and more defined aesthetic. Now if you're into neon colors, you're going to love this game, and the backgrounds do have some motion to it that do keep it quite interesting. On top of it, as you move through the levels, the colors will start shifting and once again keep that visual appeal. At the same time, if you stay stuck in one world for very long, those backgrounds might somewhat become repetitive, and I would have liked them to swap maybe every 10 or 15 levels. It would have made even more variation to the overall design. However, this being a budget entry, I've got to say I was fairly impressed with the quality of the visuals. Performance-wise, I'm also glad to say that there are no frame drops, no frame pacing issues, and that is a good thing because a game like this requires an extreme level of precision. Now sound-wise, you've got a pretty decent synthwave soundtrack to go along with those neon visuals. Once again, the track fluctuates pretty much between each one of the major worlds, and the track is long enough that I didn't really pick up on too much repetition. However, obviously, if you do stay stuck on the same level for quite a while, you might hit that level of repetition. But ultimately, yet again, for a very budget entry at only $3.99, I've got to say that graphically and sound-wise, this is a very decent package. Now it's time for the verdict. And if this is one of the first reviews of mine you're watching, my full review scale is available down below in the description of the video. And in the case of Chameneon on the Nintendo Switch, I'm going to be giving this game a 7, putting it at the low end of a good game. Ultimately, at its extremely budget price point, graphically, sound-wise, and gameplay-wise, it is a pretty interesting offering. It also does offer a pretty fresh mechanic in its shifting neon paths. However, at the same time, it doesn't break the mold and do something completely crazy in the Autorunner genre. Just don't forget the warning I gave earlier in the video. This is a game for people seeking a challenging 2D Autorunner, not someone new to the genre that just wants a casual experience. So now let me know what you think. Are you going to be picking up Chameneon on the Nintendo Switch? And do you agree with my review? You can always let me know in the comments down below. And on the way out, don't forget that if you did like the content, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and click on the notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.